All right, recording from our respective locations, I am Matthew Huffman, Public Affairs Director at MCADSV, and this is Momentum, a webcast produced by your coalition, connecting advocates across our state. So it is February, which is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and I am welcoming two new folks onto the webcast this month, and it might be their first time on, but certainly won't be the last time. So joining me this month, I have Savannah, our Partnership Development Coordinator at MCADSV, and Beth, Prevention Specialist at MOXA in Kansas City. Savannah, Beth, welcome.
Thank
Hi,
you.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to have y'all on today. Well, before we get too deep into our conversation, wanted to give you both a chance to introduce yourselves. So, Havana, I will let you take it away.
Sure. My name is Savannah Watkins. As Matthew told you, I'm the Partnership Development Coordinator here at MCADSV. New to the role, but not new to the work. I've been in the work almost 10 years now. I've served in various capacities, from volunteering, from being program director at a program, executive director at a program, and now I'm at the coalition. So just being an advocate in many aspects, and happy to be here today.
Thanks, Savannah. We'll turn it
Sure.
over to you now, Beth.
Right. Hello. My name is Beth Schleusner. I'm a prevention specialist at MOXA, and I am coming up on 3 years doing the work with MOXA. I've been in the same position and lucky enough to be within the same schools and districts all 3 years. So that's been really exciting to watch them grow. And in our conversation before we started recording, I shared a little bit of my personal introduction I do with students when we first meet them. So I thought this would be a good time to kind of pitch what I do when I'm working with students. So here's my little personal introduction when I work with middle schoolers. So when I was in 7th grade, I really wanted a boyfriend. And I didn't know the first thing about how to get one or what to do with one once I got one. So I did what any curious and very excited 7th grader would do. And I asked my friend, we'll call him Jay. And I said, Jay, you've had a girlfriend before. Will you give me some advice on how to get a boyfriend? He's like, oh my gosh, I got you. Don't worry. And he gave me a couple pieces of advice that, oh boy. So the first one was, you gotta kind of change your look. You can kind of be a lot sometimes, and guys don't really like that. You need to be a little bit more girly and maybe wear some makeup. It's like, okay, sure, I can do that. He's like, for number 2, you are a little too loud. He's like, I really like it. You're my friend and I think it's great, but I don't think guys like that. I think you're a little bit too loud. You're a little too outspoken. So you need to kind of bring it down. I thought, okay, yeah, I guess I can do that. If it means I get a boyfriend. And the last piece of advice he said, it's like, once you get a boyfriend, it's very important that you know that you should never deny him, especially when you're around his friends, because that'll really make his feelings hurt. And that was real life advice that I received from a peer and from a friend. And that sat with me and that stayed with me all through middle school and through some of high school. And the remnants of it stayed with me through college. And now, knowing what I know and being a professional in this field, like, holy red flags, changing yourself and not respecting your own boundaries and not having your partner respect your boundaries is like really big red flag. And I can't help but wonder if things could have been different, if I would have, maybe certain things that were really challenging in my life later would have been different if I had had a safe adult to talk to about this stuff, who was knowledgeable and who was able to give me sound advice for, wanting to be in a relationship at that age, because a lot of students do. So thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you joining us. And thank you so much for sharing that story, Beth, and the intro that you give when you're working with young folks. I'm curious, how do they react to that?
Usually when we're in person, you can kind of feel an energy shift. The way that I like to operate when I'm in a classroom is I like to share a little piece of myself, and then that way I can get a little bit of them in return. I say this all the time: you give a kid a little bit of love, and they will give you so much back in return. And we have a lot of conversations about this at work. Is like, what is the appropriate level of story to share with a student? And my general rules around that are: I don't talk about victimization generally, and I talk about stories that are from when I was a kid, when I was in middle school or early high school. And I try to keep it silly just to kind of warm up the room a little bit. And I've had good responses. I've had good luck with it. I had some kid who just flat out didn't believe me. I was like, it's real. Like, unfortunately, like, maybe that's a good sign that they didn't think it was real. How could someone give that bad of advice?
Yeah, that is interesting. Like maybe it's almost a sign of the times that young people are starting to recognize that more early and seeing, no, this actually is really bad dynamics for a relationship. And so, yeah, that is really interesting that you get kind of mixed reactions, but yeah, I completely agree with you. That's such a really important way of being relatable and building trust with young folks.
Yeah, we love a story. They're very important.
Yeah. Well, and storytelling is also just such a big part of prevention and being relatable and building trust and getting more people brought into the work. And that's really what we're going to chat about today. I mean, yes, it is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, but I don't want us to just talk about red flags of what dating violence is. And we really need to, I think, as a movement and as a field, start talking more about how do we create really healthy environments for young people to thrive and not focus so much on these red flags and warning signs, but really building youth up. So one of the things that I kind of want to touch on is, yes, by the time young folks are in middle school, are in high school, many of them, if they haven't experienced some form of dating violence directly, they are picking up on it. They're seeing it happen with their friends and their peers. They're witnessing it, also witnessing it in the media that they consume too, right? So they're aware of it. But I think a dynamic that is really unique to Missouri is that, across the state, we don't really have comprehensive sex education in schools. And so having programming that really talks about gender norms, that talks about power dynamics in relationships, that talks about consent and boundaries, all the stuff that you were talking about, Beth, those programs are kind of few and far between in our state. And so I'm curious to hear from the two of you, how do you think we can try and build more of those opportunities for young folks? Because we know they want to have the conversation. So how would we provide that?
You can go first, Beth.
Okay, that's a really good and hard question. The number one thing I can think of is, meaningfully allocating money within state budgets toward this work. The way that a lot of our programming is funded is through our county. And, because we've been able to access grant funds, we've been able to expand our program to several new schools and pay people to do the work, people who are excited about doing it, because this is work, connecting with students and running these programs. I run a Green Dot program. We also have a program called Shifting Boundaries, and then a program for high school called Youth-Led Prevention. And I think the most important thing is making sure that we have funding that's allocated toward that work. Getting into that before we can get there, because that kind of feels like a pie in the sky idea sometimes, but I think meeting people where they are is so important and is such a valuable piece of our work. So understanding where kids are in their social lives and where dating is happening and, where people are communicating i.e. social media, is something that's an untapped resource for prevention work. And personally, I haven't done a ton of work in social media, and is something that we're looking into perhaps doing more of. But Havana, I think maybe you might be able to speak on that a little bit more.
Sure. I actually want to say thank you for all the work that you do, because you do such amazing work, and you're definitely a leader in this movement here in Missouri. And with that, I think it's good to look at programs that are already established and see what it is that they're doing and what's working for them, and how you can make it unique for your particular area. Rural is always different than more urban. Budgets are different across the board. Some organizations have larger volunteers, some of them don't. Like, how is it that you can fit the needs of your community and the organization that you're in? And I think, pardon me, part of it is also making sure that we include youth in our conversation about what it is that they want and what it is they need. And sometimes just being able to kind of shift some of that mentoring and teaching to them so that they can kind of help educate their peers. And then there's a way that you have someone right there on campus that can kind of help with whatever it is that they're going through or talking to, because maybe your budget doesn't allow you to come in once a week, but you know that there's this 8th grader here that's amazing, that's been through the program the past 3 years, and they can kind of help you navigate the relationship that you need to have to talk to a school counselor or someone else. And also, if you do have, you know, the funding and social media campaigns out there, although you may be the person that knows, like, this is right, this is a great graphic, just simply like reposting and sharing that, somebody else is going to see it. That may not always seem like they're on Facebook because they don't like anything, but people be lurking on there. So I encourage folks to just go ahead and share it. You don't have to, it's not a lot of work. You don't have to repost or, you know, take a quotation out of there, just a simple repost. And you'll be surprised the people that may be watching, and you may help them because they may not have anyone at home that they can have those conversations with. And maybe their school isn't allowing anyone to come in and have those conversations either.
Havana, that is such a great point. That, and Beth, you had kind of mentioned it as well, but hearing both of you talk about the need to meet people where they are, and yeah, really getting that feedback from youth about what is it that you need and want. And then also recognizing that, yeah, budgets are going to be different from one agency and school to the next. And some schools might not really be open to bringing someone in to have that conversation. So then what other community groups and organizations can you be working alongside? And Havana, I know that you've done a lot of work in the faith community as well. And so thinking about in prevention, I think it's often a natural fit that we want to get in the school and be directly in front of students there. But there are so many other avenues to really get out and talk with and work alongside youth.
Oh, absolutely. Pardon me. Youth groups, churches, they're always looking for someone new to come in and a new face, because again, they're usually relatively small, volunteer ran, like they kind of get tired of coming up with content and stuff. And what better way than to have somebody else come in and have a quick, candid conversation with them and let them know that, hey, this is something that's not okay. Here's something and how to do something a little bit better. Maybe they're that one person that wants to change that. They've seen that generational abuse and those type of things, and they know it's not right, but they don't know how. Now they have someone outside of their circle at church, outside of their peers at school, and they can reach out to on a different occasion when no one else is around or no one else knows. And you know, there are other ways to kind of get connected. You can meet them at community centers that may have sports teams, or just community centers. They're always looking for after school program guest speakers to kind of come in. And you know, there are a lot of different ways, although school is like the most important way, because you have them in a classroom already. They're sitting down. You don't have to have them sign up for anything. They're already signed up. You just show up. It's easier. We do have to get creative in a different way, so we kind of try to reach our community and those that may be homeschooled. Just because they're homeschooled doesn't mean that they may not go play a sport or something. And who knows what they may be dealing with at home as well. So yeah, we definitely got to get creative and kind of think outside of the box when it comes to this.
And both of you have really talked about, you know, the importance of working alongside other folks too. And I think that that is such a really important piece here, because we don't do our work in a vacuum, right? It's so important that we get out and work alongside other youth serving organizations so that we can really build those safe and healthy environments for young people to thrive and have access to what they need. And Beth, you are also a part of our prevention capacity building cohort. And I know that y'all have talked a lot about how MOXA really prioritizes outreach and really taking the time and the energy to build those relationships with other people. So can you kind of talk a bit about that and how that's such a really important aspect of the prevention work happening at MOXA?
I would love to. Thank you. Outreach is, I think, my favorite part of my job. If you look at my calendar in any given year outside of last year and this year, the majority of my time is allocated for outreach, because outreach is it's this umbrella term and it can mean a lot of different things. And that's the beauty of it. We talked earlier about meeting people where they are and how every school and every community is going to have different needs and different places where there are gaps that we can fill in, or different places where someone can provide education or just be another set of eyes in a classroom, or just be there for people. And that is so important, because if I'm walking into a school building and I'm like, okay, I have this program, it's going to be great, we're going to pick you're going to be a leader and we're going to do this, and they don't know who I am, that's not going to be very effective. And that's often, it's honestly what I found my first year of the program. I was, being very specific to the T and not focusing on outreach quite as much, and people were like not buying in. And I got so frustrated at first, thinking like, oh, this program is so important. Like, don't they see that this is a problem? And having to take a step back and hear from my supervisor, like, hey, they should get to know you and you should get to know your school partners before you can jump into this higher level of work or ask extra things of them, especially in schools, because teachers are doing so much already and they already are carrying a heavy load. Having a total stranger come in is not, it's not going to work. So just like I was saying, I share my personal introduction with students. It's also part of my introduction that I share when I do trainings with teachers and with adults, just to start that conversation and to say, hey, I am a person who has been in the shoes of your students. I'm hoping to get to know you a little bit better. And trying to reach out to connect with people on their level, because everyone is going to be in a different place. We talk a lot in our office about, often high level topics. And one critique I have of this work is that the language that we often use is so academic and often way above people's heads. And it's not, common language. So making sure that when we are in community spaces, when we are in schools, that we're using language that is easier to understand and easier to process and more simplified. A small example of that is we talk about power and control, and we say that someone might do an abusive behavior to gain or maintain power and control over someone. And gain and maintain power and control, what does that mean? If you're, 12, you're hearing that, what does that even mean? To get control over someone and to keep control over someone is just a really simple way to change your language to make it easier for someone to understand. So going on that big tangent is just to say that having people understand that you are a human and you're here to work with them can go really, really far in just opening up those doors to valuable prevention work and being able to do the programs that we are getting funded to do.
I want to ask a follow-up to that, because you mentioned that on a usual year, your calendar would be filled with outreach.
Oh, yeah.
This past year has been anything but usual. And
Mhm.
so what does outreach look like in a pandemic?
Oh my goodness, it is hard. When I say outreach during a standard year, I'm working with kids face to face. I am, sitting down with students. I have one student that I've worked with before who she was in a theater class and she got really bad stage fright before going up and telling some jokes, and to the point where she was hyperventilating. So I took her out into the hallway and we walked around a little bit and just talked through some coping skills. Do you have any friends in the class that you can make eye contact with? Do you want to take a couple deep breaths with me? Thinking about, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And she told me the worst thing that could happen is she could potentially throw up. I said, yeah, that's pretty bad. I said, what's the best thing that could happen? She said, well, I get through my jokes and I get to sit down. I said, okay, so what's more likely to happen? So I get to do my jokes and I sit down. Okay, and bring her in. And she did a lovely job. Her jokes were really funny. And that's something that I miss so much, because right now in the pandemic, we are having such a hard time reaching students directly. And there's, good reason for that. Teachers and schools want to make sure that their students are safe and these children are staying safe. And having someone from an outside organization, it can be hard to guarantee safety, and it can be hard to get students to log in to a Zoom call to do an education session. So the way that we have focused our prevention efforts and our outreach efforts right now is by giving resources to the adults and to the teachers and administration that we have connected with and built those relationships with, saying, hey, I'm a resource here for you. This is our support line. This is a 5-minute journaling exercise you can do with your students about checking in about their mental health. Or here's a fun video that we found, and here's some follow-up questions for you. I'm not able to work with students directly right now, but I know that there are teachers who are, and I want to make sure that those students are still getting that information. And they also still know that organizations like Moxa are here to help. Just to get the word out however we can, through whoever we can, is really valuable right now.
I think that that's a really, really good point, Beth. Thinking about how important outreach is right now and making sure that organizations and individuals know about your agency and all of the services that you provide, from early on primary prevention all the way through adulthood for anyone who might have experienced violence, abuse, trauma. People know who your organization is and all the services that you provide. I think that that's actually a really good way of talking about awareness, because, we're all aware that sexual assault exists. We're aware that domestic violence exists. Teens are aware that teen dating violence exists. So all of these awareness months really need to move beyond just raising awareness of the issue, but raising awareness of the resources that are available and all of the people who are working together to prevent abuse and trauma from happening. So I kind of want to move our conversation into that. How do we get beyond awareness and into collective action together? So whenever you both are out doing work in the community, trying to build those relationships with folks, oftentimes you do have to start with that awareness piece, right? Here's who I am, here's what we provide. What tips would you give for people who are looking to move to the next step, though?
I'll go first if you want me to, Beth. So far as like being able to build like those relationships and make them lasting relationships, right now at the coalition, we've kind of been looking at this assessing partnership overview that RSP has put out. And it's like when you think about like these new partnerships and new ways to get the word out about your organization, to get the word out about the programs that you're offering, like you have to make sure that first, like, is this going to be worth the work of doing the work, making the partnership? Is it going to be solid? What are their values? What is it that this organization or this group thinks about, ending violence? Who's asking for it? Are we asking them to partner with us, or are they asking us to partner with them? How can we both collaborate on this? Like, what are we both going to get out of it? Like, even with the school situation, hey, I want to have this relationship with you. And in turn, what is it that you can offer the school? Well, not only can we come in, but maybe your students need volunteer hours. Maybe we can have them volunteer on a particular plan or project and they can get volunteer hours. Maybe we can help cultivate this healthy environment where, like I had mentioned earlier, they can be like a peer support at school. And that's something that can go on their resume as well and kind of just build things up. So, just trying to figure out what the ultimate goal is, who's going to be impacted by it, how everybody views, because everybody is going to be like the likely partner that you want. And just making sure that it's going to be worth your time and effort to even try to build this relationship and have this awareness of not only what it is that you can bring to the table and what you do, but how they can support you and your efforts and work as well.
Yeah, Havana, you brought up some really interesting things there that I hadn't necessarily connected. The the thing that I keep coming back to in this question of moving into collective action is the amount of work that we as service providers need to do to fit to the needs of our communities that we're working with.
Mhm.
We come with our specific knowledge and our experiences, and we walk into communities and say, hey, I'm here to help. And there's a really, really thin line between being helpful and being patronizing. And making sure that you're sticking with the community and you're doing what they're asking of you and not pushing beyond and saying, hey, I know better than you because I'm the expert in X, Y, and Z, because that's not helpful. It's going to cause people to build up those walls and push back against you. So being willing to put in the work and listen to what people need is going to be incredibly valuable. One example that I've been able to do is I have a school that I work with, Brookside Charter School. It's a pre-K through 8th grade charter school here in Kansas City. And they, in my first year, asked if I had any experience doing mediations. It's like, no, what's that? I had no idea. Brookside's a pretty incredible school. They're built on a foundation of restorative justice in education. So they said, hey, we have this community partner and they do mediation training. Is that something that you would ever be interested in doing? It's like, absolutely. So I was able to jump in and through the Kansas City Center for Conflict Resolution, do a few days of training to become a trained mediator. And I was able to transfer that over into doing mediations for this school. So rather than sending kids into detention for having an argument or having a fight with their friend, they get to sit down with me or one of the other trained mediators at the school, and we talk through, what harm was done. Let's hear what happened on your perspective and from your perspective, and let's talk about how we can grow together rather than thinking this is you versus me. This is us versus the problem, and we can solve the problem. So, and that's something I never would have gotten that skill set had I not been willing to say, hey, I don't know what's going on. I need to learn, and being open to those opportunities for learning. Another really important piece for inspiring that collective action is also reminding people of the work that they're already doing. Because prevention work is, it seems like this really big thing, but it's a lot of small pieces that come together to create meaningful change and culture change. When we do our green dot programming at our middle schools, we are constantly reminding students, hey, you're already doing these green dots. You're already doing these helpful behaviors by checking in on your friends when they're having a bad day, by not laughing when someone tells an inappropriate joke, by asking for help if there's a situation that you're not sure how to respond to. The kids are already doing all these things, and adults are already doing all these things. So it makes that barrier to entry for these prevention efforts a little less scary if you have one foot in the door already. I'm already doing prevention work, so I can add one or two of these extra ideas in my back pocket so I know how to respond when something else comes up that maybe I'm not comfortable with or I know is not okay.
I love that.
I do too. I love that so much. What a really cool opportunity that you had to have access to professional development
Oh, yeah.
because of a relationship you had formed. And it just benefited the prevention work you all are doing so much more. You get to build even deeper relationships with people in the school, with young people. What a really amazing opportunity.
I would love to see all of my colleagues being able to do the program and to get through it. I also want to recognize that this is also a huge privilege to be able to have funding through our organization to access trainings like this, that often there's organizations that don't have that. So we feel incredibly lucky at Moxa to be able to um, participate in that kind of development and potentially use that education. And I can pass that along to others who might not be able to go into those 3 days worth of training. So that's just something that, popped into my head, important to recognize.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. It is a really important thing just to recognize. And it also makes me think about when you are looking to identify new partners and really start working alongside others in the community, that's such a really important thing to recognize as well. Like what privilege and space am I taking up here? And am I the right person to be leading these efforts? Do I always need to be in the driver's seat? How can I really help support other people doing the work? And so I'm also curious to hear from both of you. How do we go about identifying those partners? How do we identify what the needs of the community are so that we know we're not overstepping?
I think for me, it's kind of like a needs assessment, so to speak. Like there's going to be a different needs assessment for each area and each, obviously, you know what it is that you want to do. The top three things are this. We want to be able to bring awareness, educate, prevent, use, add on to prevention. So if they already have like, oh, well, we do anti-bullying. Hey, guess what? That's prevention. So we just want to add another component on to that. So I think it's identifying what's already there and how it is that you can be more of service or of help, and then being able to present that, like Beth said, like acknowledging what they already have and what they're already doing and saying, hey, this is something additional that we can do, but making sure that we don't just come in and just like try to take over everything. Like maybe it's not that we need to facilitate per se. Maybe we can just train your coaches. We can train your staff that's already doing it, and they can go ahead and deliver. The message is still going to be delivered. If you need additional support, we're there to support you. Or if you need, like, we're the resource. Anything comes up, someone wants to talk to you confidentially afterwards, know that this is our program and these are the services that we offer. So I think it's really important to assess each situation, because like we mentioned earlier, like everybody has different things going on and different availability, and some schools are partially closed, some are partially open, some are only letting certain people in. So just kind of seeing where it is that you can fit in and how you can help them, and maybe not always thinking that you have to be the face of things. Maybe you can be doing the work on the background as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, Havana. I think that that's such a really important thing to recognize. And I think as advocates in this work, we are kind of naturally helpers. But I love what you said of how can I be of service to you, and approaching those conversations by here's how I can help you. I think that's such a really important piece for relationship building. How about you, Beth? What are some tips that you would give folks?
I'm just reflecting on what Havana said, and I think you really spoke to the importance of the messenger. And we want to share all of these amazing things that we're doing, and you have to find the right messenger. And I think there's a process that goes into that, in being a part of a community and, jumping in to say, okay, how can I help? And sometimes that means you are helping in a school, you're helping a teacher who has an extra squirrely classroom, and you're just there to be an extra set of eyes, or sit in the back of the room with the kids who might need a little extra support. It's, when you do a training with teachers or with community, to really say and actually verbalize, I am here to help you and I'm here to listen. That's something for me I found in my first, year and a half, that I was just rushing through this program and wanting to be the expert and trying to prove myself, and not realizing that, like, the reason why we do this work is so that people are aware of what the organization does and aware that they can access the organization And if I am the messenger for that, that's great. But also, if we're just giving people the information, they can pass that along and they will be the best messenger for the people who they have built that trust with. It's, a lot about trust and like gaining that trust with folks.
I like that. And I think about like what you said about you being like the mediator at Brookside. Like if there's like students like you haven't met yet in like the prevention part, but you like mediated a situation, they'll be more comfortable, right? Like, oh yeah, she kind of calmed me down or helped me through the situation when I almost got put out of school or something. Like, I'm going to listen to her. So I really, really like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Even just having them see your face a couple times, just being recognizable, being a presence in a building can be so, so helpful, and is definitely one of the biggest things I've struggled with this year, is not being able to be in a space with people and, realizing that there's going to be some things that we miss because we're not able to be all together. And, there's certain, like synergy that happens when people are in the same room and you can recognize things more easily. So I'm very much looking forward to being able to be back in classrooms again. But until then, we really have to rely on the people we have relationships with already and give them all the resources and make it as easy as possible for them to share the information and be able to send people our way if that's what needs to happen.
So I also want to think about youth as stakeholders and making sure that whenever we're doing really good prevention work, that it is youth centered and that we are providing opportunities to be those trusted adults. We are really putting in the work to gain youth's trust in the work that we're doing. So I also want to ask you both about that too. How do we go about being that trusted adult? How do you build relationships with youth so that, you are seen as relatable and a trusted source and not the adult who's coming in to give that stock conversation?
Yeah. I can start on this one.
Sure, go ahead.
The most important thing to remember when working with youth is remembering and reminding yourself constantly that the students that we work with are experts of their own experience, and they have so much knowledge and so much wisdom that they hold, and like recognizing that we can tap into that, and they are, they can be teachers themselves. And that's the best way to learn, right? Is if you can teach someone else. So some of the ways that we get youth involved in our prevention programming at the middle school level is we ask teachers, or we ask students to find influential students. This is a big component of Green Dot. And we say, okay, who's influential? If we ask students, who would you talk to if you had a problem? Or we ask teachers, who do you see in your classroom who has a lot of social power? Whether they use that power for good or not so good, we don't care. We want the kids who have that social power, and bringing them in to a specialized student leadership training to give them those skills before we send them out to the rest of the school, because that way they are already experts, and we talk to them about how to have conversations about the program. We do a whole little mini lesson where I challenge students to have a conversation with me as if I am a student who is like, this is really dumb. I don't care about this. And we do a little role play and, give kudos to the students who are willing to try and willing to, start that conversation. It's always really exciting. We also work with 8th graders and, who are finishing up their last year of middle school, getting ready to go to high school. And we give them the opportunity to create a marketing program of their own. So they can design, usually we'll do a wristband and some stickers or buttons, and then we pass them out to students where they can share them with a friend. This year, because we're not able to do that quite as easily, we've said no to the wristbands, and we've just designed a bunch of stickers. So I had a group of 8th graders at Brookside that we did a 2-day mini student leadership training that we focused a lot on what it means to have a movement, to create a movement, and to, have a conversation that creates meaningful change. We reflected a lot on the Black Lives Matter movement and how that has changed and grown over the last 7 years. And, within that conversation, trying to ask the students, okay, what is important for your fellow students to know? And they came up with a couple things. One of them was, we might be apart, but we are all still in this together. And a theme that we had talked about was recognizing their excellence as Black students, and also just supporting and uplifting Black Lives Matter. And so they designed these incredible stickers that we are going to get printed and given to the school. So that way the school can pass them out with lunches or with materials. And our students will have designed those. And there'll be a nice little conversation piece that someone will have it on their water bottle or their laptop cover. And that's a great way to start a conversation about, hey, the place that we did this was with the Green Dot program, or just to see that positive messaging, even if it doesn't start a conversation, is an excellent reminder for students that they are, a part of something really important, and they are included and welcomed within our work.
That's amazing. I really, really like that. That's
Yeah.
so cool. And
I'll
that's
share some with you.
yeah, that's
Wow,
also
we
like,
want those stickers.
we do. I was
They're
thinking
very
about
cool.
my son has like stickers on his water bottles, like every
Mhm.
school year. He's like, oh, I got these.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's what they do. See? But that's also like a conversation starter outside of school. Like when
Mhm.
people see those, like that's another way to have like that conversation, and low prevention just by a sticker that's on there. Like I really like that.
Mhm.
Thinking about it, I always think about like being myself. Like if I'm totally myself and transparent, children read people. Like
Oh,
they
yeah.
understand like the vibe. They understand if you're genuine. They understand if you really don't want to be here. So be yourself. And if that's not your area, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So you're not going to get the trust of the youth if you aren't feeling and genuine about being a trustworthy person and being honest. Something you had mentioned earlier was about talking about your own conversations, Beth, like with what happened to you growing up. Like that's super relatable. That's going to catch their attention. So again, you're being genuine, you're being honest and truthful. And so they're a lot more likely to believe you and feel like they can trust you because they know that you've talked about something that was near and dear to you in your experience. So I kind of do the same thing as well. Like I always share like something I went through or some of the challenges that I had, and then it kind of gets them to talking. But I don't like doing all of the talking, right? Like I want to ask those open-ended conversations. So what's your experience with it? Well, what do you think about that? Well, what do you guys want to talk about today? Still being able to stay on that subject matter, but letting them be the experts, just like you mentioned, like, well, let's talk about some TV show that something may have happened on, which ironically ends up falling in place for whatever you got going on. One time I remember I was doing a group with Job Corps, and something happened on this show Greenleaf that was supposed to be like a church. It was a really bad church, but anyway, something happened on there with these teens, and this guy like trying to basically make his girlfriend have sex with him. That ended up being the topic of our next Thursday's conversation. They watched it. They wanted to have the conversation about it. We were talking about what were some of the signs, what you have done different as a cousin that was right there, and you knew that. How could you have done something differently? What would you have done? And they did the whole conversation. They brought it up. Hey, Miss Watkins, did you see Greenleaf last week? Actually, I did. You guys want to talk about it? And there it is. Like they felt that comfortable that they can have that conversation and ask you about a show that they've been watching. And then we were able to compare it to real life situations. And then they all end up sharing, sadly, situations they had already been in, things that they had witnessed and what they did and what they wish they would have done different. So being able to be so genuine and so transparent that they feel comfortable with you makes them feel comfortable enough to have those open conversations, and then also letting them be the experts and kind of lead some of those conversations with you, facilitating in, age appropriate way. And sometimes we do have to bring them back, but, still remembering that they're kids and they need space to speak and talk freely about like their feelings and their experiences.
I think that that speaks really, really highly of your connection with those students. For kids to bring up a topic of conversation that might be really challenging to talk about with an adult, there's only a handful of times where that has happened. And what an awesome litmus test for the trust and the relationships that you built with that group. What
Yeah.
I would have given to be a fly on the wall to watch that conversation happen. Kids are so wise.
Yes.
I learn something new every time I spend, an hour with a group of kids.
That's
They're
so true.
incredible.
They are. They make you feel really good. Sometimes they make you feel really old because you're like, what's
Oh
that
yeah.
song you talking about? What's that?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. So I was really glad to know. I thought it was like an older person show, but it was kind of funny to see that these teenagers at this program, they were like between 16 and like 20, we're talking about the show. So it was kind of funny too. It's like, oh, I thought that was just for like us older people.
They see it all.
Yep, they do.
Well, Beth and Havana, I appreciate both of you being so genuine and giving your time to have this conversation today. I think both of you brought in so many really practical pieces of advice for others who are doing this work, but you also just shared so much about your own experiences. And like we've talked about on this episode, that makes such a big difference. Just being really honest and genuine goes a long way in building relationships. So I appreciate you both for giving your time and expertise to the episode.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I do like to end all of the episodes with kind of a lighthearted, little more random question that always relates in some way, but again, is a little more lighthearted. And Beth, because you got us started by talking about some bad dating advice that you got as a younger person, I want to circle back around to that and ask, what advice would you give to yourself now as a teenager? So, looking back on everything you know now, what advice would you give your teenage self?
Oh gosh.
And I won't make you both
Mhm.
go immediately. I'll give mine first because I put a little thought into it.
Thank you.
So yes, as a queer person growing up in the South, it was one, zero representation of other out queer folks, and so a lot of it was like trying to blend in with other people. Looking back on that now, I definitely would have told myself, don't grow that goatee and don't wear that puka shell necklace. You're not doing yourself any favors, and you're definitely not making yourself more attractive to others. So skip that phase entirely.
That's so funny.
That's some good advice. Oh my gosh. I can go next.
Okay.
I, in thinking about my 7th grade story, the advice that I would give to my sweet, sweet 7th grade self is your boundaries are important and deserve to be respected. And the right people in your life will not try to make you smaller and will let you take up the space that you deserve to take up. Yeah,
like
that's what I would tell. I would also tell her that I love her very much and she's going to do really cool things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, I love that so much.
Still can't think of anything. My younger self, when it comes to dating, probably to always remember to go like on like double dates and have someone else with you that's like safe and you feel comfortable with. And also, if I did go on a date with someone, to make sure that we had cell phones back then, but like to like text the other person, just kind of let them know how it's going. I have a cousin that I do that with now. Like she lives in Texas and she's like, just so you know, this is what I'm doing. But that's something I wish I probably would have done earlier with dating. Although my parents really didn't let me date that much when I was when I did, but when I would like do things, I would do it by myself. And I think I probably would be more comfortable doing it like double dates with friends or letting more than just my parents know where I was at, because my parents always wanted my little sister to go with me, which was so not cool. I guess she was supposed to protect me. I don't know.
There's strength in numbers.
Yeah, there you go.
It is.
Well, I appreciate y'all sharing that advice. Those were really great words, and both of you are doing really great work. And so I'm really glad that you can bring those lived experiences into the work that you're doing now. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew.
Yep. All right. Well, until next episode, good to see y'all.
Bye.
Bye.